retaliatory strike, which would later be dubbed Keith's War. On the night of February 25, 1643, Keith ordered an attack on the Indians at Pavonia. Though he told his soldiers to spare the women and children, they ignored his orders and killed 80 Indian men, women, and children. The 11 Indian tribes who had previously been at odds with each other united to drive out the Dutch. Most Dutch colonists were either killed or captured. Those who were fortunate escaped to New Amsterdam, where they could watch their homes and their crops burn across the river. Pavonia was destroyed. Peace did not return to the area until a ceasefire agreement ended the hostilities in August 1645. Settlers in the colony asked the Dutch West India Company to recall Keith to Holland for an investigation, and the hostilities convinced many settlers to return home to Europe. The Dutch experiment in a new world was teetering on the brink of collapse. In 1646, hoping to restore order and profitability to the colony, the Dutch West India Company appointed Peter Stuyvesant Director General of New Netherland. A former soldier, he had served as governor of the Dutch Caribbean island of Curacao, where he lost his right leg fighting the Spanish. The injury forced him to wear a wooden stick as an artificial limb, leaving him with the unfortunate name of Peg-Leg Pete. Many believe that the uncomfortable prosthesis might have been the reason for his reputed nasty demeanor and autocratic style. But however unpleasant and dictatorial he may have been, he was at the very least practical and learned a great deal about what not to do from his predecessor. Stuyvesant adopting a more conciliatory tone with the Indians, and the colony flourished. New settlers arrived, and it looked as though Stuyvesant was achieving the objectives he was chosen to do, bring about peace and prosperity in New Netherlands. But it wasn't long before he was tested. On September 15, 1655, in what became known as the Peachtree War, the colony was almost destroyed a second time. It began when a young Indian girl entered the orchard of Henry Van Dyke on Manhattan Island and picked the peach of a tree. Incensed, Van Dyke shot her, killing her instantly. Unfortunately for the Dutch, Stuyvesant and the entire Dutch defense force had left the colony days earlier, headed for the Delaware Valley. Taking advantage of his absence, 500 Indians swept through Hoboken, Pavonia, and Staten Island, killing over 100 colonists and capturing 100 more. On his return to New Amsterdam, Stuyvesant faced a grave situation, but he successfully negotiated with the Indians and bargained for the release of the captives who were being held at Paulus Hook. Ultimately, the captives were returned for a ransom of gunpowder and lead. Following this last Indian crisis, Stuyvesant realized that the settlers at Pavonia needed to establish a fortified town for defense, rather than return to live in their isolated estates along the Hudson River. With this in mind, and as part of the peace negotiations, on January 30, 1658, Stuyvesant met with local Indian chiefs at Fort Amsterdam for the repurchase of the western shore. It included all the lands between the Hackensack and the North, the Hudson rivers, from Weehawken and Secaucus to the Kilburn Cull. At his request, the Council of New Amsterdam approved the hilltop site for a garrison-style town or village. Settlers from the colony were invited to move to the fort and live behind a square wooden palisade where they could defend themselves with the militia against the Indians. The site chosen was a former cornfield cleared by the Indians on the heights, approximately 2 miles from the Hudson River, and was named Bergen, the Dutch word for hill. Settlers built homes on lots within the fort and established farms outside its walls, creating a defensive zone against the Indians. Stuyvesant then signed a peace treaty with the Indians on March 6, 1660, making the Peachtree War the last Dutch-Indian hostility in New Netherlands. On September 5, 1661, Stuyvesant issued a charter of incorporation to the village of Bergen that included a court of justice, a church, and a school. That same year, he granted Bergen limited powers of self-government and a court of inferior justice. Members of the Dutch Reformed Church, now the Old Bergen Church, began the establishment of a permanent meeting place and the colony's first elementary school was built. The village stretched from what is now Broom Street on the south to Newkirk Street on the north, and from Tours Avenue on the east to Van Rypen Street on the west, with a tall log stockade built around it. What is now Bergen Avenue was the road that ran through its center, with gates and blockhouses at either end. A public square was laid out in its center, now Bergen Square. A well in the middle was the town's first waterworks. Soon afterwards, another settlement sprang up again at Communipaw, stretching along Phillip Street, but it came under the government of Bergen. Its inhabitants reached Bergen by Jersey City's first road, which followed the present line of Communipaw Avenue up to what is now Summit Avenue and up to Academy Street, which led to the schoolhouse at Bergen Square, giving Academy Street its name. Little did those settlers know that their village would only exist 3 more years as a Dutch colony. While Stuyvesant was busy organizing the new fortified village of Bergen, English King Charles II and his brother James, the Duke of York, were plotting to solidify their control of the northeast coast of America. The Duke of York commissioned Colonel Richard Nichols and 4 ships and 400 soldiers to take over New Netherlands. On August 27, 1664, the English fleet arrived in the New Amsterdam's harbor. Nichols demanded that the colony surrender. Stuyvesant, old soldier that he was, tried to rally support among the settlers to defend the colony. Rather, the settlers and his council advised him to surrender. After a week of deliberating, Stuyvesant surrendered to the English on September 8, 1664. Without firing a shot, New Amsterdam ceased to exist. James, the Duke of York, renamed the colony after his dukedom. It became New York. But the English were benevolent conquerors. The settlers could keep their property, had religious freedom, and the English continued to trade with the Dutch. These conditions allowed the Dutch to retain their ethnic culture in the New World, and for decades the Dutch retained a separatist nature. Reminders of this community's Dutch past are all around in street names like Sip and Bergen, words like stoop and pancake, and of course in plays like The Legend of Communipaw.
How can he give us a quiz if he hasn't taught us anything yet?
You're supposed to be a smart kid. Maybe he thinks we know stuff already.
I memorized every single day in the AP books and bet I know more dates than Mr. Murph. And stop, here he comes.
Hello, everybody. Well, I know some of you, but not all of you. And since this is a mixed grade class, let's introduce ourselves, shall we? I'm Mr. Murphy, and history is my game, which I guess you already know. How about you? Why don't you say your name, your grade, and whatever.
My name's Leandre. I'm in 3rd grade. Sorry, you already did that. I'm just trying to follow the code.
Thank you, Leandre.
I'm Marcel, I'm in 5th grade. Whatever.
Marcel, whatevers are not required. Good to meet you. Next, in the back.
Douglas, 9th grade. I'm here under protest.
Oh, really? How so?
I don't like the idea of a mixed grade class. No offense.
Oh, my paper.
Douglas, it's new for all of us. Let's roll with this, shall we?
Wait, Mr. Murph.
Yes, Marcel.
I do know whatever. I mean, a question. Will there be a quiz, like, today?
Well, kind of, yes.
Not gonna do it.
How can you give us a quiz?
Not fair. You know my name, but I don't know yours.
Oh, sorry. I'm David, 10th grade. Look, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, okay? I just mean you haven't taught us yet, and well, never mind.
No, Davian, you have a point. Look, don't worry. It's not a graded quiz.
It's not, but I got all the dates memorized.
I don't believe we've met. You are?
Oops, sorry. Hi, I'm Srimati. I'm in 5th grade. I study all the time.
Well, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to know dates, but you know, there's a lot more to history than dates and battles and all that kind of stuff. History is about you and me. We are making history right now. And way back when, people like us were alive, doing things together, making choices, making history.
Mr. Murph,
Yes, do you have a question?
I like the comment.
Okay.
I felt that our history class will ever be in a history book.
Well, Leandre, you might be right about that, but that doesn't mean that you won't make the history books someday. Any one of you, or more than one of you, or all of you could make waves in this world. The kind of history that we're studying here, it's about people.
Like what?
Well, like Jersey City. What do you know about Jersey City's history?
I know like downtown used to be where a lot of poor people live. I know more rich people live there than in any other part of Jersey City.
You're right.
You can't even afford to live there anymore.
Yes, you're right. I know I can't.
I know that people just came and tore all the old houses down. I read on the newspaper once.
Good, that's true.
You read the newspaper?
My mom does, and sometimes they read Washington.
Mr. Murph, how old is Jersey City?
Well, Jersey City was named Jersey City about 175 years ago.
What was it called before that? Or was there nothing before that?
Oh no, people have been living here for several thousand years.
Mr. Murph, I thought Henry Hudson discovered Jersey City in 1609. That's only 400 years ago.
You're right, Marcel. Henry Hudson was an English explorer who was working for the Dutch government, looking for a faster way to get to Asia because everybody was after Asian spices. Europeans loved Asian spices, and it was really hard to travel to Asia across land from Europe. So the Dutch and the English were trying to find ways to sail across the Atlantic Ocean and up and over North America, but that didn't work. So Henry Hudson did wind up sailing into the harbor here in 1609. But there were people already living here.
Indians?
Yep, there were several native tribes here, the first Americans. And on this side of the big river, we call it the Hudson River, there lived a tribe called the Lenni Lenape. They were an Algonquin people, they spoke an Algonquin language, and they have been living here for thousands of years.
So what was it called between 1609 and
1838 to be exact. Well, it was named the city of Jersey in 1820, and before that it was a part of Bergen Township in Bergen County.
Wait, Jersey City is in Hudson.
Yes, but there was no Hudson County until 1840. This was all Bergen County before that.
So what about before 1820?
There were villages, all part of the town of Bergen. You might recognize the names. There was Hoboken.
You mean Hoboken?
Yep, and the Weehawk.
Weehawken.
and Communipaw,
Communipaw? You mean like Communipaw Avenue?
the very same. Now there's some confusion about whether the name Communipaw comes from the Algonquin language that the Lenni Lenape spoke, or whether it's a shorthand way of saying Paw's community.
Who's Paul?
That would be Michael DePaw, who Pavonia is named after. He liked naming things after himself, and he was the first and largest Dutch landowner around here, so I guess he figured he could do that. Do you know what paw means in Dutch?
No.
It means peacock, and that should tell you something.
Mr. Murph, I thought New Jersey was made by the English.
It was, when they took over governing the area back in 1664. Before that, it was governed by the Dutch. You see, that's who Henry Hudson was working for when he sailed into the harbor in 1609. For 55 years, this area was a Dutch colony. The Dutch had colonies all around the world back then. And this was part of the colony of New Netherland. And down where the Liberty Science Center is by the Turnpike exit, that used to be the shoreline at high tide. And right there was the village of Communipaw.
That's where Communipaw Avenue is, right?
Or begins, depends on how you look at it. That's where the Dutch people first met the Lenni Lenape. That's where they first brought African slaves onto this land to work. It's where a lot of history was made. So a little geography. Which way was the village of Communipaw? It's east of here, right?
Oh yeah, I knew that.
This is where it all started. Hey, I have an idea. Want to go see?
Yeah.